with it. It's a large urban university in Detroit. And as you see in the bullet point, it's diverse in all ways. And really, the diversity that really matters most in the classroom is we really have a wide range of abilities of students that sit within my class. Many of these students are the first in their family to attend college, the so-called FIDIACs. And with these students, the expectations of a college student oftentimes aren't clear. University culture isn't clear. And many of them are taking this class because of a general education requirement, and they don't really quite understand the purpose of the class and why it fits into their major. So there's a bit of a motivation issue sometimes as well. The particular class that I teach is, there we go, Psych 101, Introduction to Psychology. It's a large course. It enrolls typically 200 to 300 students. That number can get up to 400 students, and the majority of these are not psychology majors. Again, they're taking it mostly for their gen ed requirements. The university considers this to be a traditionally difficult course because it has a fairly high fail rate, but traditionally difficult really means for some. Students that are well indoctrinated to universities, cultures, expectations, tend not to find this course difficult. But again, with the large range of abilities in the student, there are certainly a number of students that do find it challenging. Now, as I was teaching across the years, and I've been teaching this course since 1999 at Wayne State, a number of problems came up that I really wanted to solve, and this seemed like, to me, to be a way to do it. One really revolves around study habits. And as courses became more and more PowerPointized and lecture overheads placed on things like Blackboard, or we have this Echo 325 system that can stream these things, students really began to see the lecture overheads as being the course. And anything else associated with the course really wasn't necessary. So the general idea, if I understand what's on the lecture overheads, I can obtain mastery in the course, which is really not a great assumption for students to make. Also ideas on study habits, and this is typical, the masked versus spaced, students studying all at once, those overnight cram sessions, which are far from optimal. And also just wanting students to come prepared to lectures, that, having students do the reading, so when they're sitting in lectures, they have some understanding of the material that's being discussed. I also wanted to improve performance on the exams, and really I see this sort of in two ways. One, getting students to practice how to take an exam, so multiple choice exams in this class. The more they practice testing, the better skills in this form of assessment they can develop. But also testing as a study strategy, and this is really a lot of research now showing that repeated quizzing is and can be a very high impact study strategy. And then finally, I really wanted another means to demonstrate competency. For the first early years I taught this class, 75% of the course grade was from exams, and the fail rate was fairly high. And many of these students who have difficulty with the exams, maybe are stressed taking the exams, really were probably pulling their grade down significantly. So I really wanted another way for them to be able to show me that they have some level of competency on the material. So my strategy, and when I began using a learning curve as part of my course, was really designed to solve these types of problems. One, I put an increased emphasis on the assigned reading, so getting away from this lecture overheads are the course. And now when students ask, and it's directly on my syllabus, where are the exam questions coming from? My answer now is they all come from the textbook, and they all do. So this gives the textbook value, and this gives the assigned readings value. And to do this, I've used learning curve, which is derived from the textbook, and this is now a significant component of their overall grade. I want to reward good study habits. So if students do what is right and what is expected, I want them to be rewarded for that. So regular work, and by regular work, I want students to engage with the material at least twice a week. I reward with points. So there are two learning curve exercises that they do weekly, and this becomes a significant number of course points. All of these assignments are due at the start of lecture, meaning that if they do them, getting their points, doing the regular work I want them to do, they're coming to lecture with some understanding of the material. And also the hope is that, at least at some implicit level, that they learn that regular quizzing, which is what Learning Curve compels them to do, is an effective way to learn the material. So just to give you an idea how this is implemented in my course, this is a screenshot of my syllabus that shows my course point allocation. And here the arrows, these are the things that come from LaunchPad. Learning Curve, which I'll talk about today, is now 21% of the grade. I also use something called the data visualization activity, which comes with LaunchPad, at least with the particular textbook that I use. My understanding is this is not available for all textbooks yet, so I'm really not going to talk about this. If you have questions on it, I can talk a little bit about it at the end, but this is 6% of my grade. So the exams, which were once 75% of the course grade, are now reduced to 37%. And Learning Curve, which is, as you're going to see, another way to demonstrate competency, is now 20% of the grade. So it's a pretty significant chunk. I also have other things that I work in. I use class participation, again, to encourage them to come to lecture. So I use clickers. And we have a standard laboratory section in our courses that counts for about a quarter of the grade. This is a screenshot of my syllabus, and I wanted to show you this because I want to show you how I link the Learning Curve exercises to my syllabus. So this is just the first 3 lectures that I have, and what I really want to have you pay attention to are these titles here. These 1A and 1D, this is actually the name and the numbering of the actual Learning Curve exercises. So I wanted my syllabus to directly correspond to Learning Curve, so I took the names and numbers directly from Learning Curve, popped those into the syllabus, and also linked those to the printed pages in the book. So just showing you now, if we jump over to Learning Curve, this is the Learning Curve website. And this, again, is just to show you how what's on the website corresponds to what's on my syllabus. So this is the required material for the first examination. This is the first part of the textbook reading. This is the header in the textbook. The students can get this through the ebook right here. And then here's that name of the Learning Curve exercise right there, 1A, Psychology's Roots. Now, one nice thing about the way this is set up is it really sets up a workflow. And what students can do when they come into this exercise, they click to the ebook. Through the ebook, using it on the website, they'll go through and do the reading. And as they keep clicking along through the ebook will then, when they finish this section, will launch them directly into Learning Curve. So it sets up a nice workflow for the students where they can go in, they can do the reading that's assigned, and then go right from the assigned reading to their Learning Curve exercise. So one of the things I really like is the workflow that this sets up. I just wanted to give you an idea of something else that I do on my Learning Curve site. LaunchPad has a number of different types of exercises that are available. I don't use many of these. I just use the Learning Curve and I use the data visualization exercises. But there's some other good ones that are available as well that I just have available for the students as optional exercises. And just to keep things straight, I set up different folders. One folder is required materials, and that's the workflow that I set up, and the other is just a collection of the optional materials. So if I'm just going to jump back one slide, you can see here this is under the folder of required materials. Here's the required reading and the workflow, and then again, the optional materials would be in this pull-down folder here. Now, in case you're not familiar with Learning Curve, I just wanted to take you through quickly what Learning Curve is, but I also want to show you a bit about how I use some of the information that's provided back to the instructor. So the policies of Learning Curve, anytime a student launches the exercise, they're going to see something like this. And it just gives them the overview of what Learning Curve is going to do. What they're going to be asked to do is to answer questions, and they receive points for answering the questions. And the goal is to reach a target score here of 450. Now, the target score is set by the publisher. You can change this. I haven't. And my understanding is they set it so it takes about 15 to 20 minutes for the students to reach that target score. And my experience has been about that a student who's well prepared is going to reach this target score in about 15, 20 minutes. And really, that's what I want them to do. 15, 20 minutes of engaging with material, plus doing the reading, to me is really what I want them to do on a regular basis. So once they hit that target score, they receive a full credit. It's all or none. The full credit I have is 10 points per exercise. If they don't reach the target score, they get 0, so it's all or none. The questions get harder, so the first ones are easy, and this is one of the nice adaptive features of learning curve, is that as students progress through, the questions get harder and harder. And there's also a diagnostic in there that it'll keep working them through areas that they are answering to less correctly. Good thing I'm not an English major, right? But it helps. It has some adaptive feature where it helps the students focus on material they're having most difficulty on. And you can kind of see here, this is what the instructor sees, but the students will see a report just like this that'll tell them, you know, you did pretty well with correlations, but drawing conclusions, you need a little bit more work. So just to give you an idea of what learning curve looks like, this is one of the easy questions. So question blank is a technique for establishing causal relationships. And I'm just going to be that guessing student. I'm going to guess correlation, which is, of course, wrong. And so it tells you, whoops, it is not correlation. It tells you what a correlation is. And now what I can do, I could either check the ebook, get the answer, I can get a hint. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to guess again. I'm going to guess experiment. And yay, I'm correct. So once you're correct, you get some points. Now, if you're guessing and sort of randomly getting the answer, you'll get points, but very few of them. So you'll slowly increment up this scale, and the scale will end when you hit the target score. If you answer them correctly, you get more points. As the questions get harder, you get more points. So a student who's well prepared can get through this really in a minimal number of questions and really rake through to this target score fairly quickly. Students that aren't prepared and guessing, it's going to take them a long time and a lot of questions. So going back to this initial page where you get the report, what I want to do is just show you a little bit of some of this information you get back. So if I click on more results, this is what it pulls up. And really what I want to draw your attention to is up here at the top. And the target score that the students had to reach was 450 in the class. Average got 467. But really the question what I look at here is the average number of questions received. So on average, it took students 24 questions to reach the target score, which is about what you want to see. And if you think 24 questions, you know, minute at the most per question, you're right there in that 15 to 20 minute range. And it also tells you how many students actually completed the activity, and you see 97% of my class did. The other thing, if you click on student activity scores there, it'll pull up individual students' names, which I blanked out here. It'll show you their activity score and the number of questions it took them to get here. And this is a nice diagnostic. You can see a lot of the students are right there around average, so you can assume they prepared, took them about average amount of material, but they actually did the reading, they prepared, they weren't just guessing. When you see some students getting into the 30s or so, then you have a pretty good idea that they're guessing their way a little bit more through the exercise. So if you're talking to the students or if you want to reach out to the students, this gives you some information on how well they're preparing. Students can also come back to this after the due date, and I have this set up the due date at the time of the lecture. So students can always come back and continue. They won't get points for it, but it will tell you, like, here's a student that continued to accumulate points, did 74 questions, had a high activity score. So this is an example of a student who's continuing to use learning curve to study. So one last thing I want to talk about in the time I have is, does it work? And when I first started using learning curve and using a system like this, to me, it was fairly new. And before I really wanted to invest myself into it a lot and really, you know, compel the students to use it, I wanted to know that it actually worked. So I want to tell you a little bit about how I changed the organization of my course, how I implemented learning curve, and then how I tested the effectiveness. So fall of 2013, I first started using learning curve. I recommended it, I didn't require it, and students could earn a small amount of extra credit for using it. Starting in fall 2014, learning curve was required, and this is where I made it valuable to the students. It was worth 24% of the total course points. This shows how learning curve use changed by exam as a function of making it required, and it kind of makes sense. I mean, here it was just extra credit, and about 40% of the students were doing it for extra credit, but once you make it required, you get now into about the 90% range, which stays pretty steady across the 4 exams of the class. So requiring it, no surprise, students are using it. But what I wanted to do is to look to see whether students that were using Learning Curve and using Learning Curve regularly, did it improve their performance on exams? So what I did is I took the data that I had from my courses and using students in my Fall 14 and Winter 15 course that used Learning Curve. So excluding those that weren't using it, I just used a criteria of 75% or more. So if they completed 75% or more of their exercises throughout the semester, I considered these to be users, and this was 85% of the class. And I compared these to the non-users when it was just recommended. And these were students that completed less than 50%. That was 187 students, and this was 60% of the class. And basically what I'm going to assume here is that the overall demographics, again, that diversity I was talking about is similar in between the two groups, though this is something I've yet to test. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to compare the users to the non-users. So first, we looked at this. This is use by exam. And for some reason, I'm not going forward. Here we go. So here's the data. So the Fall 13 in green, these are the non-users, and this is the Fall 14, Winter 15 users. This is the exam score, exam 1, exam 2, exam 3, exam 4. And what you can see across all 4 exams, there's a significant increase in exam performance, and roughly, and I'll show you a little more quantitative data on this, roughly by about 10 points, which is about 5 questions per exam correct through using Learning Curve. If I look at it a different way, and this is looking at distribution across all of the exams, and from, this is looking at the score distribution from the F's down here, 50 to 60%. 60% is 50% correct. It's a 120-point exam. So this is the grade distribution. The red, again, is the users. The green are the non-users. And 2 things to me that were important. One, if you look at sort of this low-end range here, the low-end range definitely decreases. So there's less students that are failing or getting B's on the exam. If you look over at the higher end of the range, the B's and A's, you see now the distribution is having this nice shift towards the happier side of the distribution. And there's different ways you can look at it, but basically just looking at the mean data. Again, the mean data here is going up overall across all exams by about 12 points, which is 2 points per question. That's 6 more questions correct per exam. So I feel that this has had a significant performance improvement for my students. So one last thing I want to show you is I wanted to know what students thought about this. And so I did a couple of surveys asking students if they found it useful. And these are the number of students answering this question. Did you find Learning Curve to be useful in preparing for exams? And you can see the vast majority of them said it was highly useful, then to useful, and very few of them said they did not find it useful. And then the last thing, and I like this question myself, it's that, okay, you've paid for it, and the way I phrased this question originally, would you pay for it again? So would you recommend I continue requiring using it? Would you pay for it again in this course? And students said yes. So this to me was showing that the students really found that this study tool had a lot of value. And in fact, asking the students and other questions, they're really beginning to shift their study strategy, really moving away from just looking at overheads and using more and more repeated engagement with the Learning Curve as one of their primary study strategies. So with that, I know I wanted to keep it to around 20 minutes. So with that, I will just stop talking and see if there's any questions I can address for anybody. So I will turn it back over to the mods. They're still there.
Sorry, I was on mute. Yeah, you can keep it on your screen. There was some interest in the data visualization exercises, if there's time.
So let me show you, I can show you real quickly what those look like. So actually, I had a slide right here on it. So it's something, first of all, I should say that it's not in every book yet. So, and I don't know, you really have to talk to your particular rep to see when or if it's going to be rolled out for your book. I just don't know. But the thing I liked about it, one of the things I had in my learning outcomes, but I never really was able to do a lot, is I wanted students to be able to look at data, understand where information and psychology is coming from, that we're a research-based discipline, but also just to be able to look at a graph, understand it, to be able to interpret it, all of these higher level skills that are really hard to address in a large section. We do it to an extent in our lab sections, but this is another way, and I think it has a lot of promise. So what the students do in these exercises, and the different exercises have different themes, and this is looking at whether SAT scores predict college success. That's the overall theme of the exercise. And what it does, it's going to work them through a series of 10 questions, and each of the questions is going to have them look at the data, analyze the data, and work on the data in a different way. So here's the first question where they just look at all of the scores, and they're just asked, it's a very simple question to address the trend. And I made the incorrect answer here just to show you that when it's incorrect, they don't get points. It's different than learning curve in that you get one shot at it. The points are all or none. It does give you feedback, but the students really have to take their time, answer the question to get the point right. And other questions we'll ask them, so here it says sort by scores, year, or gender. You can break it down in different ways. You can look at just males, look at just females. You can look at just particular ranges. So through this interface, it has them sort of present the data in different ways, draw conclusions from the data in different ways, and then at the end, draw an overall interpretation for the big question. So I think it's an exercise that has a lot of promise, and I'm really happy to see something like this being developed.
Thank you. One other question. Is your whole department doing this, using LaunchPad Learning Curve?
Well, in our department, we don't have a standard textbook. So we teach across the year, I think, somewhere 8 to 10 large sections of intro psych. It's a couple thousand students a year. We don't have a common textbook, so different instructors use different textbooks. So most of us use something like this. Those that might use another publisher, and they would use something, products that are similar. But almost all of us now use a quiz-based learning system. And all of us have data from our different systems to show that it's effective in helping students perform better. So while we might use different publishers, we use similar types of learning systems, really in similar kinds of ways.
Thank you. And one more question related. Have you done any longitudinal studies to see if the improvements in study habits are having an effect in later classes?
That's a great question. I haven't. It's a wonderful question. I haven't done it. We've discussed it. I'm working with a colleague right now to do a more comprehensive analysis of my test, or my student scores, but also looking at his student scores, which with a different publisher, a slightly different pedagogy. And so we're really interested in that. Do students, once they find out that quizzing is an effective strategy, do they continue to quiz? Do they continue to do reading before going to lecture? We'd really like to see transferability of those skills. Quizzing is a little bit harder because once they start moving up, those kinds of tools tend not to be available for higher level courses, but there are ways to do it. So it's a great question, and we have it on our mind, and so we may look at that in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. That's the end of the questions we got. So I guess with that, I'd like to say thank you very much, Tom. Thank you for everybody who attended. If you have any questions, feel free to email me. We will be emailing you the recording within a few days. Okay. And there's my email address. If you see it, I'm always happy to interact with people on email as well. Okay, great. Thanks. Okay. So long, everybody. Bye-bye.